We come, as we often do during the course of Advent, to hear the words from Isaiah the prophet. Isaiah was speaking to his own people with really out an understanding of how we would see the life of Jesus illuminated in his words. Hear these words from the 9th chapter of Isaiah, verses 2 through 7. The people who walked in darkness have seen a great light. Those who lived in a land of deep darkness, on them light has shined. You have multiplied the nations, you have increased its joy. They rejoice before you as with joy at the harvest, as people exult when dividing plunder. For the yoke of their burden and the bar across their shoulders, the rod of their oppressor you have broken, as on the day of Midian. For all the boots of the tramping warriors and all the garments rolled in blood shall be burned as fuel for the fire. For a child has been born for us. Authority rests upon his shoulders, and he is named Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. His authority shall grow continuously, and there shall be endless peace for the throne of David and his kingdom. He will establish and uphold it with justice and righteousness from this time forward, and even forevermore. The zeal of the Lord of hosts will do this. May God add blessing to the reading and hearing of this God's holy word. And then as we come to the gospel, we know that John is the one who reminds us that Jesus wasn't simply a baby born in a stable in a manger, but Jesus, in fact, was the light that would illuminate the world. I'll invite you to stand as you're able, in heart, mind, and spirit, as well as body, as we hear these words from John, chapter 1 through 5 and following. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things came into being through him, and without him not one thing came into being. And what has come into being in him was life, and the life was the light of all people. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overcome it. The true light, which enlightens everyone, was coming into the world. He was in the world, and the world came into being through him, yet the world did not know him. He came to what was his own, and his own people did not accept him. But to all who received him, who believed in his name, he gave power to become the children of God, who were born not of blood or of the will of the flesh or of the will of man, but of God. And the Word became flesh and lived among us, and we have seen his glory, the glory as of the Father's only Son, full of grace and truth. This is the word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. You may be seated.
I am terrified of the dark, like deathly afraid of the dark. Like, I won't walk into this sanctuary if I'm here by myself and the lights are out. That's how afraid of the dark I am. Like, I know logically when I turn out the lights, before I go to bed, that the clothes I laid out for myself on the closet door are just clothes, but when I turn off the lights, I swear it's a monster. To this day, I sleep with a nightlight. And that was an interesting conversation to have with my wife. Let me tell you, that was a really strange one. What we settled on putting the nightlight in the bathroom and then leaving the bathroom door open, so that way there's still light. Anyway, I am terrified of the dark. And it's because I don't have control. I don't know what might be lurking in there that I can't see or that I can't grasp or that I can't control. And my fear of the dark only got worse when we went on a cave tour as a family. We were sitting family in Arkansas, and we went to Blanchard Springs. It's a cave in north central Arkansas. If you ever have the chance, it's a state park. It's a beautiful, beautiful place. Don't let my misfortune and horror stop you from going. To start the tour, it was beautiful. It was fantastic. We were walking through this cave, and we were learning all about the various critters that lived in the caves, from the salamanders to the bats. We learned about the stalagmites and the stalactites, and we were learning about the bat guano that was yay high when they first discovered the cave. Of course, as an elementary school student, that was my favorite part of the tour, was the bat guano. And I was having a great time learning so much about these amazing features of our planet. Until we came to this large room, and it had this big domed ceiling in it. And as the tour guide is talking, he turns out the lights. And it is pitch black. I mean, we're talking about the kind of black that you can't see your hand in front of your face. If you've not experienced that kind of darkness and you're not petrified of the dark, I highly encourage you to do so because it is truly a life-changing experience. And I was terrified. I was squirming and squealing. I was like, I don't want to be here. I don't want to be here. And all I could think about in the back of my head was how those bats that they talked about earlier would be swooping down behind me to suck my blood. And then my father, because he was funny, decided he was going to do one of those movements and say, oh, did you feel that? Yes. And so I started screaming and yelling and flailing and flailing. I swear I hit a couple stalagmites, a couple strangers, and I think I even bonked my sister right in the face. It was ugly. And I ruined that cave tour, not just for myself, not just for my sister who now had a black eye, and not just for the stalagmite that I may or may not have broken, but for the 24 people who were on that tour. I was petrified and afraid, and I responded poorly. And that's really the question for us this morning. How do you respond to darkness? Maybe and hopefully you're not as terrified of the dark as I am, but how do you respond when you're afraid? That's the question for us this morning. And really, we have three options. One, we can be like elementary school Wesley and flail and scream, trying to do the best we can to protect ourselves, often at the cost of those around us. We can resign ourselves to the fact, well, it is what it is, there's nothing I can do about it. Or somehow, by the grace of God, we can maintain hope. Hope that the God who saved God's people from Egypt has not abandoned us yet, and is still by our side. Our scripture lesson from Isaiah this morning comes from the middle of this section, about chapters 6 through 12-ish. We heard a little bit already this morning. And it serves as a beacon of hope to the Israelites in the midst of great pain and anguish. During the reign of King Ahaz, and I keep messing up the name of this, so I'm actually going to look at it and make sure I do it right. Hold on. Because I realized I was practicing it sitting in the chair. I was like, no, that's not right. That's not right. Arameans. Arameans? Arameans. There we go. Arameans. I kept trying to put other syllables into it. But the Arameans were threatening the Israelite people. And King Ahaz was afraid. But he wasn't afraid that his people would suffer. He wasn't really concerned about the temple itself. He wasn't really concerned about the people that he was sworn to protect. He was concerned about his own power, his own privilege. He was afraid that if they came and conquered, if they came and waged war, that he would lose the power that he enjoyed and benefited from. So what he did is he went and he bent the knee to the Assyrians. He went and begged for their assistance. They were the biggest, baddest power that was on the face of the earth up to that point in time. He went and begged for their assistance, and lo and behold, they did come, but the cost was high for his people and for him personally. He ended up putting idols in the Jewish temple. He ended up needing to collect outrageous taxes to pay for their protection. In trying to preserve himself, not only did he fail to do so, he also harmed everyone around him who he was charged to care for. He lashed out and he chose poorly. But Isaiah still tries to offer hope. Hope that, again, I say, the God that saved God's people from Egypt had not abandoned them yet. But the hard part of this story is that, well, it only gets worse. The salvation from the Assyrians comes from the Babylonians. But when the Babylonians come, they don't just destroy and conquer the Assyrians, they destroy and conquer Israel and Jerusalem as well. They sack the temple. They impose higher taxes. They divide the people across the kingdom. The situation gets worse and worse and worse. It's like those classic monster chase scenes that you have in Jurassic Park or in The Phantom Menace, the first Star Wars, where you're being chased by the velociraptors, but then they get eaten by the mutant T-Rex. which that's good, right? Except now, you're being chased by the mutant T-Rex. Things just continue to get worse and worse and worse. But somehow, Isaiah maintains hope. And Isaiah tries to remind the people that there is hope. But Ahaz continues to try to protect himself. And it's not like the Israelites themselves are blameless either, because they come and they see the destruction. They come and they see the idols in the temple, and they say, well, it is what it is. I guess these are the gods we worship now. They also lost their hope. So again, I ask, how do you respond when you're afraid? Things aren't that much different in the time of Jesus either. It changed the Assyrians or the Babylonians for the Romans. People are still being oppressed. And it's not just the Romans who are oppressing Romans, it's the Jews repressing themselves as well. Pushing people to the outside because they're different, because they're sick, because they're too complicated. We don't want to deal with them. They push them to the side. And as we see in the Gospel of John from the very first chapter, when Jesus comes to bring light, what do the people do? They say, nah, we're going to keep doing what we're doing. We're okay with what we have. Even they refuse to see hope. And it's not like after Jesus dies, things get immediately better either, because when John writes the Gospel of John in the 90s or so, you have Nero, who was the most cruel and terrible Roman emperor that you could imagine, and then you get Domitian. Things just continue to get worse and worse and worse. And yet Isaiah continues to offer hope. And sometimes I look at the world around us right now, and my goodness, I'm not a very hopeful person. I prefer the term realist, personally. Most of my family, including my spouse, would say that I'm a pessimist. I say bah humbug to that. I thought about telling the story about our little tiff about Christmas ornaments and decorations and trees and stuff, but I figured that's too much drama. You don't need to know about all that. But sometimes I look at the world around us and I wonder, by God, where's the hope? I mean, look at the season that we just came out of. You thought that the 2016 election couldn't, that was the pinnacle of bad. And then we have a pandemic in 2020, and you think, oh, goodness gracious, this is terrible. Surely it can't get worse than this. And then we have another terrible election season. And then in 2021, the pandemic gets worse and worse and worse. And, when I look at a world around us that is both on fire and flooding at the same time, I struggle to find hope. And when I look at a world in which the poor continue to grow poorer and the rich continue to grow richer, I struggle to find hope. In a world where we continue to grow more and more divided each day, not just in this country, but across the globe, sometimes I wonder, where on earth could there be hope? Sure, by now you're wondering, where is the hope? Why is Pastor West so sad and disappointed? But the prophet Isaiah again reminds us that there is hope. That there will come a day in which the very instruments of war are no more. A day in which the very instruments of oppression are no more. In which the very instruments of division are no more. A day in which is ruled by peace. But in this world, it is so easy to feel alone and powerless. After all, what can I do as one single person to fix all of these problems. A few years ago, I went on another cave tour, this time in Silver Dollar City. Weird place to go on a cave tour, but that cave is really actually honestly worth it. It's really quite beautiful. And I had been on many cave tours before. I still loved them, but I hated the darkness part. Whenever I knew they were about to turn out the lights, I shut my eyes as tight as I possibly could. But this time, when they turned out the lights, something was telling me, keep your eyes open. And so I did. And about halfway through his little talk inside the cave, the tour guide took out a match, and he struck it. And suddenly the entire cave changed. It turned my fear into joy in an instant. Granted, that one little match, it didn't bring light to the entirety of the cave. It didn't fix the problem completely, but it made a difference. It gave my eyes a chance to adjust. It gave me a chance to observe my surroundings, to make sure that I was away from my father so he didn't do the bad thing. It gave me a chance to be reminded that light can indeed return. My friends, as we wait, as we prepare this Advent season for the coming of the light of Christ, we do not just wait passively. We are that spark of light for the world around us. We are that little match. And independently, one little match isn't going to do much. I had a little shtick that I was going to do where I was going to have all the lights in the sanctuary be turned off. I was going to extinguish all the lights. I was going to do complete total darkness so I could have a little panic attack on stage in front of you. And then I was going to take out a match and light the one match. I want you to imagine that for a second, because I, over Thanksgiving, forgot to buy matches and forgot to talk to Chandler. Also, I decided that I didn't know how many of you were afraid of the dark, and so I didn't want to subject you to that terror. But that one little match, it didn't fix the problem completely. It didn't rid the whole room of darkness. It wouldn't even rid this room of darkness completely. But it's a start. And it's a sign of the hope that can indeed come. So, my friends, let us not just wait for light, but let us be light. So that when we see poverty and hunger in our world, we don't just resign ourselves to it is what it is, but we buy food and we buy meals for the center of grace. And sure, we may only be able to afford 20, but for those 20 people, for those 20 meals, when we see division continue to grow, let us bring a spark of light and of peace to bring people together, to remind ourselves and each other of our commonality rather than our differences. When we see moments of oppression and racism and sexism and all of those beautiful, wonderful isms, let us be the spark of light that says enough is enough. Independently, not one of us, not one single one of us, not one match can transform that darkness. But together, if each of us strike that match together in our own places in the world, we might just yet prepare this world for the coming of Christ. So how do you respond to the darkness? Do you fight? Do you try to protect yourself at all cost? Do you resign yourself to it is what it is? Or will you be the light in a darkened world that desperately needs hope? Amen.